every day I feel like I'm coming on the news describing a catastrophic situation that I've never seen in my lifetime and that I could never even imagine witnessing in my lifetime. And then it somehow gets worse the following 24 hours. And my call gets more and more desperate. And I think that's true of every single humanitarian that I'm in communication with. Our hearts are burning. You know, this is an avalanche of human suffering, and it's 100% man-made. In terms of what we're seeing on the ground, and this is both in communication with the Doctors Without Borders team, but also the colleagues that I've known over the last 10 years going there teaching, I'll paint a picture for you. You know, we'll take Al Shifa Hospital, for example. You know, there's tens of thousands of internally displaced persons that are sheltering there right now for safety, with limited access to water, clean water, food, nowhere to sleep. They're sleeping in the corridors of the hospital. The physicians have been working for 3 weeks straight. They're receiving mass casualties, scores of mass casualties, all day and night. And these are injuries that myself, as a critical care doctor who responds to level 1 traumas normally in my job, I struggle to look at pictures of, or see videos, or hear descriptions of. You know, and I think it's quite late in the United States, so I'm hoping there are no children watching this program. And if they are, I would ask that you ask them to leave the room. We're having children come in with the majority of their body and faces burned, some of their digits melted away, limbs missing. I mean, just catastrophic injuries, just really horrifying injuries. And the doctors are left to treat them with limited pain control, running out of anesthetic drugs, too many patients requiring the operating room, so we're not able to get the patients in the speed that they need to go in, and not enough post-operative space to care for them. We don't have enough antibiotics. To treat wound infections. We don't have enough dressings. And I want to give you sort of a picture of what that means for a child, for example, who's coming in with the majority of their body burned. That is a very extremely exquisitely painful injury. And if you don't have adequate pain control for it, that child is going to suffer. If you don't have adequate dressings, you cannot appropriately clean for those wounds so that they remain clean. And if you don't have appropriate anesthetics, every single time you do the dressing changes, the child is going to wail in pain and is going to experience levels of pain that are completely inhumane. And I'm using the words of the doctors that are describing what they're having to do, having been completely stripped of all the tools of modern medicine to take care of these horrific injuries. They are saying it is humane, it is unbearable, it is intolerable. And we feel like the entire world is watching us being massacred live on TV, and they are silent to it. This has to stop. We have lost over 130 healthcare providers, many of whom I've known personally. They have lost their families. They sit at work, working 24/7 to care for patients, while their families are being bombarded, while they're worrying about being bombarded themselves as they get these constant threats to evacuate the hospital or else be bombed. And they refuse to leave because they have decided to stay with their patients. These are people like me and their children. The majority of the victims obviously are civilians, and the vast majority are women and children. And we keep listing these numbers, but they're not numbers. 3,600 children at least that we've been able to count in the death toll. The rest are still trapped under the rubble, so they can't be counted in those figures. Over 1,000 of them trapped under the rubble. You're talking approximately 5,000 children killed. It sounds like a number that we become very desensitized to, but these are individuals with personalities and characters and favorite foods and dreams, and they're somebody's everything. I want to appeal to the humanity of everybody listening to this program. If you are a politician or an average Joe watching TV at home, use whatever power in your means to advocate for this to stop. And I'm begging you as an individual with loved ones who I care about, and I can see the people in Gaza in my family, as a physician, as a humanitarian, and as a fellow human.
As a fellow human, as you said, and it is excruciating, I have to say, just to listen to you. And really, we have not shown a lot of the terrible video that we see coming out of Gaza, and we have seen it day after day after day. I want to ask you, the issue of even a humanitarian pause, let alone a ceasefire, has become so political. I mean, have you or your organization find a way to get beyond that? Because as you say, every child, every person who's been injured or suffering at this hour is somebody's everything.
You know, a humanitarian pause, and I'll tell you how some of my colleagues have described it when I've asked them what they call for. They all call for a ceasefire. And they said, you know, don't give us food and water to then just bomb us again. So I think, you know, a humanitarian truce or a ceasefire is certainly what we're calling for, a stop rather than a pause to this indiscriminate bombardment and massacre. Humanitarian aid is urgently needed, and that's everything from the painkillers and anesthetics that I just mentioned to the fuel that is needed to power the generators that are imminently going to stop running. When they stop running, that means no ventilators, no ventilators, patients who are dependent on life-supporting therapies that require electricity die. It also means we cannot sanitize water. This is already happening. We cannot desalinate water. So civilians are dehydrated or are drinking unsanitary water. And the bombardment has been completely indiscriminate. You know, hospitals are never a target. Health facilities are never a target, and they are being targeted, as are mosques and churches and schools where people are sheltering, and warehouses where materials are being kept. Humanitarian aid is being kept. Entire families have been wiped off the civil registry. There's an acronym that was coined in Gaza in the last 3 weeks and has been used way too frequently, and it's WCNSF. It stands for Wounded Child, No Surviving Family. And it is unfortunately an acronym that should not exist in this day and age, and it should not exist in the world that I hope everybody watching your program wants to live in.
Dr. Tanya Haj-Hassan, we have to leave it there. I wish you and especially your colleagues on the ground there in Gaza so much courage to continue, because they and the people you treat will need it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Paula.
And we'll be